The glass slipped out of my hand and shattered on the kitchen floor, but I didn't move to clean it up. I just stood there, gripping the edge of the counter, trying to remember how to breathe. That was the moment I knew something was wrong. Not the dizziness. I'd been dizzy before. Not the nausea. Stress does that to you. It was the way my husband looked at me from across the dinner table. Just for a second. Just a flicker. Like he was waiting for something. I told myself I was imagining it. I was wrong. My name is Claire. And 18 months ago, I was the kind of woman who believed in signs from the universe. I believed that meeting Daniel at a coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday in October was fate. I believed that marrying him 14 months later was the best decision I had ever made. I believed, with my whole chest, that the life we were building together in our little yellow house in Asheville, North Carolina, was everything I had ever wanted. I was 31 years old, and I thought I understood what love looked like. I did not. Daniel was the kind of man that other women noticed. Not in an obvious way. He wasn't flashy or loud. He was quiet, attentive, the type who remembered how you took your coffee and asked about your mother by name. He was a project manager at a civil engineering firm, responsible and steady, the kind of man my grandmother would have called a good provider. He opened car doors. He texted back within minutes. On our third date, he showed up with a book I'd mentioned once, in passing, 3 weeks earlier. A collection of short stories I'd been meaning to read. I thought that meant he was paying attention because he cared. I didn't understand yet that some people pay attention the way a hunter pays attention. To learn the terrain. To know where to aim. We got married in June. Small ceremony, just family and close friends, in a garden outside Asheville. My sister Rachel stood next to me. She wore pale yellow and cried through the whole thing. My mother squeezed my hand before my father walked me down the aisle and whispered, "You look so happy, baby." I was. I genuinely was. The first year was good. I want to be honest about that because I think it matters. It wasn't all a lie. There were Sunday mornings with coffee on the back porch and weekend drives up the Blue Ridge Parkway and nights where we stayed up too late just talking. He was funny in a dry, understated way that snuck up on you. He made me feel like the most interesting person in any room. But somewhere around month 14, something shifted. I couldn't have named it then. It was too quiet, too gradual, like the temperature dropping 1 degree at a time until suddenly you're shivering and you don't remember getting cold. He started working late more often. Not dramatically. Not every night, just often enough that the pattern was there if you were looking. He became harder to reach by phone during the day. When I asked about his work, the answers were vague in a way they hadn't been before. I asked him once, on a Thursday night, if everything was okay between us. He looked at me with those calm brown eyes and said, "Of course, why wouldn't it be?" And I believed him. Because I wanted to. Because the alternative was something I wasn't ready to look at. My sister was the first one to say it out loud. Rachel is 3 years older than me and has always been the skeptic in our family. The one who reads the fine print, the one who asks the questions nobody wants to ask at Thanksgiving. She came to visit in late October, just her, no husband, a long weekend while her kids were with their dad. We were sitting on my back porch on the second evening, a bottle of wine between us, the mountains going dark in the distance. "Is Daniel treating you well?" she asked. Not accusatory, just careful. "Yes," I said. Then, because it was Rachel, I added, "I think so, mostly." She looked at me for a long moment. "You seem tired, Claire. Not regular tired, tired in a different way." I laughed it off. I told her marriage was an adjustment, that we were both busy, that it was fine. She didn't push. But before she left on Sunday, she hugged me longer than usual and said, "You know you can always call me. Anytime, for anything." I thought she was being dramatic. 3 weeks after Rachel's visit, I found the notebook. It was in the back of Daniel's home office closet, inside a box I'd never had any reason to open. An old shoebox he'd had since before we met. The kind of thing you don't touch because it seems like someone else's history. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for a spare phone charger because mine had stopped working, and I was late for a video call. The notebook was small, dark green, the kind you get at any drugstore. I almost put it back without opening it. Almost. Inside, in Daniel's careful, even handwriting, were notes. Lists. Not shopping lists. Not work notes. Dates. Symptoms. Dosages, questions written out like research how long before onset, detectable in standard blood work, accumulation over time versus single dose, and then, near the back, written in a way that made my whole body go cold, C. How much does she weigh now? C. Me. I stood in that closet for what felt like a very long time. The box was in my hands, and the notebook was open, and the room was completely silent except for my own heartbeat, which had gotten very loud and very fast. I put the notebook back exactly the way I found it. I went and sat on the bathroom floor with the door locked, and I stayed there until my legs stopped shaking. And then I made a decision that I believe saved my life. I told no one. Not yet. Not until I understood what I was dealing with. I want to explain why, because I know how it sounds. I know the obvious thing is to grab your phone and call the police. But here's what I understood. Sitting on that cold bathroom floor, a notebook with cryptic notes is not evidence of anything. Daniel was meticulous, careful, and calm. He would have an explanation. He always had an explanation. And without something concrete, something undeniable, I was just a wife making accusations. Worse, if he knew I'd found it, and he was truly planning something, I would lose the only advantage I had, which was that he didn't know I knew. So I went back to the kitchen. I finished making dinner. When Daniel came home at 6:45, I kissed him on the cheek and asked about his day. Inside, I was completely hollow. Over the next 2 weeks, I paid attention the way I had never paid attention to anything in my life. I noticed that he'd begun offering to cook more often. Daniel had never been particularly interested in cooking before. That had always been more my domain. I noticed that he asked casually in conversation whether I'd been feeling okay, mentioning something about a stomach bug going around the office. I noticed that he refilled my glass of water at dinner without being asked, which he had never done before. Small things. Invisible things. The kind of thing you'd never catch if you weren't already looking. I called my doctor and made an appointment under the pretense of a routine checkup. I told her with the door closed and her full attention on me what I had found. I told her I wasn't certain. I told her I needed to know if there was any way to test, quietly, without creating a paper trail that would get back to my husband. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Claire, I want you to listen to me carefully." She gave me a referral. She gave me her personal cell number. She told me to be careful going home. I also called Rachel. Not to tell her everything, not yet, but to tell her that if she didn't hear from me within 48 hours of any given day, to please call my cell, and if I didn't answer, to call the Asheville police. I told her I couldn't explain yet and that I needed her to just trust me. She was silent for a very long time. Then she said, "Okay, I trust you. But Claire, please be careful." The birthday dinner was Daniel's idea. My 32nd birthday fell on a Saturday in November. He suggested, 2 weeks ahead of time, that we skip going out. Too crowded on weekends, he said. Too loud. Wouldn't it be nicer to just have a quiet evening at home, just the two of us? He offered to cook. Something settled in my stomach like ice when he said it. I agreed. I smiled and said that sounded perfect. That week I made 2 preparations. The first was quiet and practical. I put a small bag in the trunk of my car tucked under the spare tire. Inside it was a change of clothes, my passport, $200 in cash, my prescription medications, and the charger to my phone. I also added a second phone, a cheap prepaid I'd bought at a gas station 2 towns over, paid in cash, registered to an email address Daniel had never seen. The second preparation was harder. I wrote a letter, not for Daniel, for Rachel, for my mother, for the detective I hoped would never need to read it. I wrote down everything I'd found, everything I'd noticed, the dates, the details, the name of my doctor, the location of the notebook. I sealed it and mailed it to Rachel's address with a note on the outside that said, "Open only if I ask you to, or if you can't reach me." It arrived at her house on Friday. Saturday came gray and cold, a hard November sky pressing down over the mountains. Daniel spent the afternoon in the kitchen. The whole house smelled like garlic and something rich and herby. He was making pasta, a dish I genuinely loved, which felt like a very specific cruelty. He was warm all day, attentive. He brought me a glass of sparkling water with a slice of lemon and told me I looked beautiful. I sat on the living room couch with a book open in my lap, and I didn't read a single word. We sat down to dinner at 7. He had lit candles. There were flowers, deep red, in a vase I didn't recognize, which meant he'd bought it specifically for tonight. He poured wine for himself and water for me, mentioning that he'd remembered I was trying to cut back on weeknights. I'd not told him that. The pasta was in front of me, steaming. It smelled wonderful. I looked at my plate, and then I looked at his plate, and I made a decision. "This looks amazing," I said, "but I just remembered I'm supposed to take my iron supplement with food, and I left it upstairs. Will you be okay for 2 minutes?" "Of course," he said. He smiled. I went upstairs. I did not get my iron supplement. I stood at the top of the stairs and listened to the sounds from the kitchen below. I heard the chair scrape, the soft sound of movement, a small clink, like something against the rim of a glass. I came back downstairs. I sat down. I pushed the pasta around my plate and I told him about a podcast I'd been listening to. Keeping my voice light and even, I took small bites. I watched him watching me across the candlelight. About 40 minutes into dinner, I set down my fork. "I don't feel well," I said. And it was true. My hands had gone cold and my heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat, though I was fairly certain that was fear, not poison. "I feel a little dizzy." He was up out of his chair before I finished the sentence. "Let's get you some air," he said. "Come on, I'll take you for a drive. The cold air will help." I let him guide me to the car. I let him help me into the passenger seat. I buckled my seatbelt and watched through the windshield as he walked around the front of the car, and I thought very clearly, this is the moment. Whatever happens next, this is the moment. He drove south out of Asheville, away from town, toward the state forest roads I'd driven 100 times in the daylight and would not want to be on after dark. "A drive sounds nice," I said, keeping my voice soft. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere quiet," he said. He had both hands on the wheel. His jaw was set. He didn't look at me. We drove for about 20 minutes. The houses fell away. The road narrowed. Trees closed in on both sides. The headlights cutting white tunnels through the dark. He slowed and turned onto a gravel road I'd never been down, marked with a Forestry Service sign, no other lights anywhere. He stopped the car. The engine idled. Neither of us spoke. I unbuckled my seatbelt. "Daniel," I said. He turned to look at me, and whatever he had been expecting to see on my face, fear, confusion, the blank eyes of someone fading, he did not see it. He saw me looking directly back at him, clearly, steadily. Something moved across his face. The first honest expression I'd seen from him in months. "I know," I said. "I've known for 2 weeks." He was very still. "I didn't eat it," I said. "I moved the food around. I didn't eat more than 3 bites, and I spaced those out because I needed you to think I had." He said nothing. He just stared at me. "I need you to listen to me carefully," I said, and I reached into the pocket of my jacket. In my right hand, I have my regular phone. I have already sent a text to my sister with our exact GPS location and a message that says, "We stopped. Call police in 20 minutes if I don't respond." In my left hand, I have a second phone. I'm going to call her right now. His face went completely white. "You cannot stop both," I said. I opened the car door. He grabbed my arm hard, instinctive, and I said clearly, "Let go of my arm, Daniel." "She is already watching the clock." He let go of my arm, Daniel. "She is already watching the clock." I got out of the car. I walked to the edge of the gravel road, maybe 15 feet, and I dialed Rachel on the prepaid phone. She picked up on the first ring. "I'm okay," I said. "I'm on Forest Ring 84, off Highway 191, south of Asheville. I need you to call 911 right now, and I need you to stay on the phone with me." She was already crying. I could hear it. "I'm calling from my other phone right now," she said. "Claire, I'm calling right now." I turned around. Daniel was still sitting in the driver's seat. He hadn't moved. He was just sitting there in the dark with his hands on the steering wheel and the headlights pointed at nothing. And he looked, for the first time since I had known him, like someone who had run out of plans. The sheriff's deputies arrived 19 minutes later. There's a version of this story where I tell you the legal process was swift and satisfying. It wasn't. These things are never that simple. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Interviews, attorneys, the particular loneliness of having to explain to people who love you that the person you chose had been planning something unthinkable. My mother couldn't speak for almost a full minute when I told her. My father, who is a quiet man and rarely raises his voice, said things about Daniel in that kitchen that I had never heard him say about anyone. Rachel drove down from Charlotte the next morning and didn't leave for 5 days. The investigation turned up more than I had found. His search history, a substance that turned up in the residue of my water glass, brought in from the car as evidence. Notes in his email drafts folder, never sent, that made it clear this had not been a sudden decision. A life insurance policy he had taken out on me 8 months earlier that I had never known existed. He was arrested 4 months after that November night. He accepted a plea agreement. He will not be out for a long time. What I want to tell you, the thing that matters more than any of the legal details, is what I learned about the year leading up to that night. I learned that I had been doubting my own perception for months. Every time I noticed something strange, I had a ready explanation. He's stressed. I'm overreacting. This is just what marriage looks like when the honeymoon phase ends. I had been so committed to the story I told myself about who he was that I kept editing the evidence to fit the story instead of updating the story to fit the evidence. The notebook cracked that open. It forced me to see what was in front of me without the filter of what I wanted to believe. I also learned the preparation is not pessimism. When I put that bag in my car, I was not giving up on my marriage. I was not being paranoid. I was acknowledging reality and acting accordingly. And that choice is the reason I am here to tell you any of this. For a long time after everything settled, I found it hard to trust my own judgment. That is, I think, one of the quieter damages of something like this. Not just the fear, not just the grief, but the way it makes you doubt your own ability to read people, to make choices, to love without that background hum of is this real, is this safe? Can I actually trust this? I'm still working through that. I won't pretend otherwise. But I also want to tell you where I am now, because I think endings matter. I still live in Asheville. I kept the yellow house. It took a while to feel like mine again, but it does now. I repainted the kitchen a deep sage green, which I love. I have a garden in the backyard, and I grow tomatoes badly and herbs surprisingly well. Rachel comes to visit every couple of months, and we sit on the back porch with coffee and talk for hours, the same way we did when we were kids. I see a therapist on Tuesday afternoons. I go on long runs on Saturday mornings. I have a small circle of people I trust entirely, and I no longer feel the need to perform certainty I don't feel. And sometimes, on a November evening when the air gets cold and sharp and the mountains go dark early, I stand in my kitchen and I feel something that I can only describe as an uncomplicated gratitude for being here. For being in this kitchen, in this house, with my sage green walls and my imperfect tomatoes, and my whole, intact, continuing life. I want you to trust that flicker of doubt when it surfaces. You know more than you think you know, and you are stronger than you have ever had to prove. If this story reached you, I hope it reached you because you needed to hear exactly that. Thank you for listening. If you're new here, please subscribe and leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from, and if you know someone who needs to hear a story like this, please share it with them. I'll see you in the next one.